Hey, good evening. Thank you for joining us on the Thursday Night Hockey Show. I'm Dave Valente. Want to say hi to everyone watching us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and tonight on the camera over here, folks watching on TikTok. Our first episode on TikTok ever. So, welcome to those watching on TikTok. If you want to like, share, subscribe, and all that fun stuff, please go over to my YouTube page or my Facebook page. It's much easier that way. I'll try and look over here every once in a while and check questions, but this year is our third year on, and I keep saying our, it's our third year of doing the Thursday Night Hockey Show. This year I'm doing it solo. Travis Rednick, our previous co-host, had some commitment issues this year with work and everything, so I'm doing it solo. Hopefully, continue to provide you quality NHL hockey content, but man, I am excited. Tomorrow is the official start of the NHL season with Nashville and San Jose playing games in Czechia, as they call it now. And so I thought it would be a great time for us to start doing the season preview for the NHL season, get those predictions out there before we actually get some games played, so that you know that I'm actually predicting stuff and not going off of a couple games played. So. Um, let's talk about one thing I do want to do is plug the Deep End Antiques, which Travis Rednick works at. It's a great antique show, antiques place in Beckley, West Virginia. If you ever find yourself in Beckley, West Virginia, drop by the Deep End Antiques. I believe facebook.com/the Deep End Antiques, all one word. It's a great place if you like glass, military history, not just U.S. military history, but foreign military history as well. So a lot of great stuff there. Basically, if you can think of it, it's probably there at the Deep End Antique. So drop by and give them some business. I do want to talk about some breaking news. This actually happened this afternoon. Jason Robertson, Dallas Stars star rookie, or it's not rookie, but third year player, has signed a 4-year bridge contract to get him towards his free agency year. That's a 4-year, 7.75 per annual average value. So it keeps Dallas under the salary cap. Not going to say that's the case for all the teams in the NHL right now. I'm looking at you, Tampa and Vegas, but Dallas does get Jason Robertson for the next 4 years at $31 million. A good value for a guy that gave you 41 goals last season is the main driver of your offense on that team. So great deal for the Dallas Stars. Good deal for Jason Robertson. Gave him a little bit of a hometown town discount, but I think he bought a little bit of he bought free agency a little bit earlier than signing that kind of 8-year deal that a lot of these young players are signing now. So he'll hit free agency in 4 years, and he'll be able to, if he continues at this 40 goal at least rate, he will command quite a contract going into that free agency year. So good for Jason Robertson, good for the Dallas Cowboys, Dallas Stars. So getting that under contract for this year. I actually watched the Dallas game last night against Colorado on TNT, and Dallas did look like they were struggling to score. They got one goal and tried to play rope a dope with the Colorado Avalanche, and you just can't do that with Colorado. So, and that, even though that's preseason, goals are going to be a premium for the Dallas Stars, so they need to get they needed to get Jason Robertson under contract. Let's take a look at. Let me stop that sharing. We'll share the screen for the NHL. We got some preseason games going on. Actually, we got one going on right now. This is the Kraft Hockeyville game out in uh, Newfoundland. I believe they're playing the game this year. And let me share that screen. There we go. All right, yeah. So it's 2-1 Senators at the end of the first period. Goals by Drake Batherson and Brady Kachuk, and Caden Gooley responding for the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens so far in preseason are winless. I think they're 0-5-1. If they lose tonight, then they will complete a winless um, preseason. Not great things are predicted for the Canadiens this year, but that I think that kind of fires a shot across the bow for them. So, and we'll get to their predictions here in a minute. Also tonight we've got the Devils and Islanders facing off at 7 o'clock. They should be getting underway here in just a moment. Let's see. We've got the Lightning and Panthers at 7 o'clock as well. Blue Jackets and will be hosting the Blues tonight at 7:30. The Blackhawks and Wild tonight at 8 p.m. And the Golden Knights will be in LA to face the Kings at 9 p.m. So a nice little slate tomorrow. But again, tomorrow is that first NHL game of the season, San Jose and the Predators. That is at 2 o'clock Eastern time. And then we still have preseason games going through the weekend. So um, kind of an interesting time where you actually have a regular season game and you've got preseason games still going. So, um, but anyway, without further ado, let's talk about some of the new places, new faces, and new places this season. Um, Pop this off the screen. All right, so I've ranked them kind of 10 through 1. And let's take a look at new faces and new places, 10 through 6 here. Um, number 10, I got Vincent Trocheck out with the Rangers. Not that I think that Vincent Trocheck is a bad player that warrants being number 10. I just think that there's just a ton of stuff, and there's a ton of players on the New York Rangers, and that there's only one puck. So Vincent Trocheck will make a good impact with the New York Rangers. We'll talk about New York's future here in a little bit. But number 9, Claude Giroux going to the Ottawa Senators. Claude is a good player, but I think he's kind of on the back end of his career. He's going home to Ottawa. This was rumored when he was traded from Philadelphia to Florida in the offseason. So it's not a big surprise he ended up in Ottawa. Um, it happened fairly quickly when free agency started that it was announced that he had indeed signed with the Senators. The Senators have put together a pretty good lineup this year. So we'll talk about where that puts them. Billy Husso was traded to the Detroit Red Wings by the St. Louis Blues. Um, this was kind of a surprise move in that Husso, for parts of that season, last season, really commanded the net in St. Louis. And had it not been for Husso, they may not have made at least been as high of a playoff team as they were. Um, Binnington did really establish himself again once the season ended, um, but I didn't think there was a reason to get rid of Husso. But there's only one net, so but there's something to be said to having depth backups in the league, especially the last few years. After coming out of COVID, several teams have used multiple goaltenders. Like my Sabres went through NHL, AHL, even ECHL goaltenders. Um, if, they could have picked up a goaltender on the side of the road and played him at a couple points during the last few seasons just because of the injuries and illnesses and things like that. So, Claude, Alex DeBrincat also going to Ottawa. This was a surprise move at the right at the NHL draft. The Chicago Blackhawks lost their minds, and they were just like, "We're we're burning it down." Just complete gut job. Um, and it's one thing had they gotten rid of like Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, some of the middle-aged veteran players, but they went after all the young players and the really good quality young players like Alex DeBrincat. And they traded him to Ottawa for really not much. I mean, I think they got a first round pick out of it, but nothing comparable that would replace Alex DeBrincat. So, um, uh, the insanity of Chicago is Ottawa's gain. Ottawa and Montreal made out like bandits, and a couple deals with the Chicago Blackhawks, who really just went insane this offseason. So, Andre Palat moving from Tampa to the New Jersey Devils. New Jersey's actually had a pretty good offseason as well. We'll talk about where they finish in the grand scheme of things. But Andre Palat is another one of those mid pieces within the Tampa Bay Lightning that they've lost over the last couple of years, like Yanni Gord and Barclay Goodrow, um, that have signed elsewhere and are really kind of weakening that middle section of the middle to back section of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and uh, great signing for the New Jersey Devils to kind of bolster their ranks as well as they try and move up from the perennial lottery selections they've been doing the last few years back into playoff contention. Let's go 1 through 5 now. For me, number 5 would be Jack Campbell going to Edmonton. Edmonton finally gets a quality goaltender. He's had his moments where it's been kind of questionable in Toronto. Um, but I think Toronto can wear even on the best of goaltenders at times, especially with the elevated expectations. And not to say that he's not going to have elevated expectations in Edmonton, but he is. It's going to be much less. Um, it's not as talented a group in front of him as Toronto, but that's more on the offensive side because Toronto is much deeper on the forward ranks. Even though Edmonton's got Draisaitl and McDavid and Hyman, um, really the once you get to lines 2 through 4, it's not as good as comparable to Toronto. The back end, they're pretty comparable. I've never been a big fan of Toronto's back end, and there's really not much to talk about with Edmonton's back end. Um, Campbell's going to help them, though. I think he's going to help them stabilize that organization and give them better goaltending than they've had in the last few years. Um, Let's see, Brent Burns going to Carolina. That was an interesting trade. Again, there are these teams that are in salary cap hell. Vegas is one of them. They have been, we'll use gambling analogies with Vegas Golden Knights. They've been all in the last few years. They pushed their chips to the center of the table. Um, and it's coming to roost for them right now. They're well over the salary cap. They still got work to do, I believe, just to get cap compliant for this season. But they were. I'm sorry. This is Brent Burns. This is San Jose. San Jose trade. San Jose kind of in that same way. They've been giving out big money contracts to a lot of players. Brent Burns probably wasn't the guy that I would target to get rid of in San Jose, but it was probably the most value that they could get. Um, they got a goaltender and a defenseman, a young defenseman for Brent Burns, but Brent Burns is an older player. I think he's 37 years old, makes like $8 million a year now. Um, Carolina's got that cap space almost pretty much, I think. And so Carolina will benefit from having really good offensive defenseman on the back end. He's still scoring a ton of points. Like I said, he was not the guy that I would have targeted out of San Jose for a big money contract to get rid of. And San Jose really hasn't learned their lesson as far as giving big money contracts to players that are getting older. And so while Brett Burns moves out, they move in Thomas Hurdle to the big money contract. So, um, but yeah, I think Brent Burns will be a good fit for the Carolina Hurricanes. Number 3, Matthew Kachuk heading to the Florida Panthers. And this is tied in with number 2, Jonathan Huberdeau, who actually goes to Calgary in exchange for him. Um, you know what? I like Matthew Kachuk. I think he's a good player, good gritty player, and does chip in quite a few goals. And I like what he brings to the game. I just never would have given up on Jonathan Huberdeau or the Florida Panthers. Huberdeau is, there are not many 90, 100-point players in the NHL, over a point a game players. Jonathan Huberdeau has been consistently that. And, he's been kind of that straw that stirs the drink in Florida. He doesn't get the press because he's not as flashy as, say, a Sasha Barkov or Aaron Ekblad, but he's healthy. He gets points. He produces. I think when we look at that trade in about 5 years, Jonathan Huberdeau is going to be tearing it up in Calgary. and or wherever. And Matthew Kachuk will have a good career, but he won't. They won't get a good as much value out of Matthew Kachuk as they do out of Jonathan Huberdeau. And then finally, the big signing of free agency, the biggest prize of free agency, was probably the most surprising destination, and that was Johnny Gaudreau, Johnny Hockey out of Calgary. He signed with Columbus on the first day, and I remember when the news dropped. I think everybody kind of went, "Wait, what? Columbus is in on this thing?" And then all of a sudden, Columbus has the announcement that they've signed Johnny Hockey, and Johnny Hockey's there, and everybody's like, "Holy cow, Columbus did something." So, good move on Columbus's part. Good, the things that he was saying about the organization and really the city and town of Columbus was very positive. And I think they kind of need that because I know a lot of people do talk up Columbus's nightlife, but perhaps not the most exciting place to be. And so maybe this kind of re gets people thinking about Columbus in a different way. Because I joke about Columbus and our old co-host Travis would joke about Columbus being the Winnipeg of America, and Winnipeg being the Columbus, Ohio of Canada, and kind of fits. So those are our new faces, new places this year. Not only new faces for hockey players, but new faces, and new places for coaches. Um, so the coaching carousel again happened. We have Paul Maurice, who was once in Winnipeg, now is down in Florida, taking over the Florida Panthers. Andrew Brunette, who won the President's Trophy, stepping in after Joel Quenneville was fired for his role in the Chicago Blackhawks controversy like 8 games into the season, took over the team and guided them to a President's Trophy, was fired, and now is an assistant coach in New Jersey with Lindy Ruff's staff. Um, let's see, Pete DeBoer, who was the coach of the Vegas Golden Knights, who, of course, missed out on the playoffs. Thank you for that draft pick. Um, uh, Pete DeBoer is now in Dallas, taking over for Rick Bowness. Rick Bowness, who was Dallas's coach, who got him into the playoffs over Vegas. Uh, is now up in Winnipeg. So it's just a carousel. Bruce Cassidy, who was the Boston Bruins head coach last season, got them into the playoffs. Uh, was fired, and a lot of things kind of came out about people not liking to play for him. And the same thing with Pete DeBoer towards the end of his run in Vegas, that he had kind of run off some players and there was friction in the locker room. Bruce Cassidy was fired by the Boston. He gets picked up by Vegas. Jim Montgomery is now behind the bench of the Boston Bruins. He had coached in the league at one point. Um, he gets another chance. Lane Lambert, who is was the hot new assistant, moving into the head coaching ranks, is now the head coach of the New York Islanders, who for some reason fired Barry Trotz after one bad season. Barry Trotz is a known commodity, had built the Islanders into a two-time Stanley Cup, well, not Stanley Cup, but the Eastern Conference finalist, going to Game 7, I think both times, and losing by a goal in both of those games. Um, uh, so one bad season, he gets out, and yeah, granted, it was a bad season. Like the whole start of that season was no good. Um, but I think a lot of the things that I would lay on the feet of anybody on Long Island would be on the feet of Lou Lamoriello. But um, he got to make the choice on who stays and who goes. So Lou Lamoriello chose to get rid of Barry Trotz and move on with Lane Lambert, taking on behind the bench of the New York Islanders. And finally, I think I probably missed a coach or two here, but Luke Richardson gets to guide the dumpster fire that is the once proud franchise of the Chicago Blackhawks. Good luck to him. That one's going to be a tough one because I don't think they've got an ECHL roster at this point. So um, key retirements this summer. We had retirements from Duncan Keith in Edmonton, which kind of helped Edmonton forward, bringing in not only Jack Campbell, but um, bringing in re-signing Evander Kane to a long-term deal, and so that was a beneficial retirement for the Edmonton Oilers. Keith had never was never really the player that he was when Chicago was winning their Stanley Cup victories, and that cap space was more valuable with other players. So he took one for the team. He's already made tons of money, and he rides off to the sunset. It was a great career for him. Three-time Stanley Cup champion. So not feeling too bad for Duncan Keith. Don't know if he gets Hall of Fame. Uh, Gets into the Hall of Fame. That would be a good debate. He was a great defenseman for a while. I don't know that he win a Norris? I don't think he did. But he was always a steady defenseman for the Chicago Blackhawks. Kind of the core of the defense there. The other key retirement this year was PK Subban. I think a little bit too young. I mean, yeah, he had struggled the last few years. He was with New Jersey last year. He was a unrestricted free agent. I guess didn't get the calls or the contract money that he was looking for, or any offers that he was looking for. I was thinking that the Sabres might take a flyer on him. They've got his brother in under contract. Bring him in as a steadying uh, veteran guy to teach guys like Owen Power and work with guys like Darlene and Yoki Haru. Um, but Buffalo didn't see fit. No other team really saw fit. I haven't seen yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if he already has a job in television, whether it's ESPN or TNT or one of the Canadian networks. Very personable guy, um, heart of gold. I've always been a big PK Subban fan, just from his work with children's charities, building a children's hospital wing in Montreal, carrying on that work in Nashville and New Jersey. Um, He's also a very snazzy dresser, but he's a very much larger than life personality that is going to do very well on TV. Um, Perhaps someone with that kind of aura would do well on ESPN, because I think with the new television lineup, I think TNT has a better on-air product than ESPN. So, I think PK and Subban can inject a little bit of life into that into ESPN to bring them up a little bit in competition with TNT. Let's see. All right. So, what stories am I tracking this year as we move into the 22-23 season? There are six key stories that I'm looking for. One is more of a personal one for me. Being a Buffalo Sabres fan, we'll talk about that in a little bit. The first story that I actually looked, and there have been news stories about it today. Continued problems with Hockey Canada. They've dug their heels in when it comes to this scandal. If you haven't followed this, in May, it was announced that Hockey Canada had settled with a young 20-something woman who had been assaulted at the 2018. Uh, there was a charity event following the World Junior Championships in Buffalo. It was actually up in Ontario that she was assaulted, apparently gang raped by several people, including members of that 2018 World Junior Hockey team. Over the summer, we've seen several denials of members of that team saying that they weren't involved, but there's also been uh, players on that team that haven't said anything. So, uh, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop there. Um, the Canadian government is losing patience with Hockey Canada, although the Hockey Canada does, it's an independent body, and uh, independent or sports organizations like the Olympics and the governing bodies like IHF tend not to like governmental interference with uh, sports bodies. I know FIFA will kick out organizations for, or suspend organizations for a while, where the government exercises undue influence on the governing body of the sport in that country. But I think in this case, if Canada's government did get involved, that there wouldn't be that kind of repercussion with the IIHF or the Olympics. Um, but I think the longer that Hockey Canada digs its heels in, the more likely the Canadian government does get involved in this thing. Um, it's the just look at the names on that 2018 World Junior Championship roster for the Canadians. Guys like Cale McCarr, and he's issued a denial of being involved. But there are other, you know, large names. So Cale McCarr is the biggest name that was on that roster, at least now, biggest with an impact now. Um, and it would be an absolutely just devastating story for any one of these guys to be positively tied into this assault. The second question I have, for the second story I'm tracking as we go into this year, is the Patrick Kane. Where is he going to end up? It's pretty clear that with what the Chicago Blackhawks did in the offseason, that they're in for a long, steady rebuild, and or they're just there to burn the place down and kind of pull a Buffalo slash Edmonton decade long trudge in the wilderness. Who knows what they're doing? But they've got two players that they really need to kind of make a decision with. One, I think, is going to stick around, and that's Jonathan Taves. I think he retires at the end of this year as a Blackhawk, having played his entire career. Patrick Kane has a few more years left. I mean, he's still scoring at a pretty good clip, and he's going to have value, especially around the trade deadline. Now, Chicago has proven again and again during this whole teardown that value doesn't really mean a lot to them. They'll trade, sticks and maybe a team bus. I don't know. I don't know what's going through their head, but Patrick Kane should be able to give them a couple pieces. He should be able to command a couple first round draft picks from the right organization, whether that's like a New York, a Toronto. Although he said he doesn't want to go to Toronto. As a Buffalo kid, I get that. I feel that. You know, um, that you don't want to play for the rival team of Buffalo. I do think that he ends up in Buffalo after the season and rides out his career as a Buffalo Sabre, trying to get them back into glory. And this season will be all about getting to a contender to compete for the Stanley Cup, and try and get his name on the Stanley Cup a fourth time. Question number three. Or story number three. How will Arizona adjust to playing in a college hockey arena? Of course, the tumult with the Glendale city government and the whatever the name of that arena was, uh, where they just got kicked out. So that now they, it looked for a while that it was for sure that Arizona was going to move. They were going to be forced to move because they didn't have an arena in Arizona to play in, and they couldn't go to the basketball arena. There's a brand new college arena that's opening up in November, so they decided that they're going to try and stick it out there until they can get a brand new arena built again in Tempe, the same area. Um, and that's still, kind of a work in progress. I don't know that they've got a commitment on the arena in Tempe, but they're going to be playing in a 5,000 seat arena, and part of me thinks that this is going to be a fun atmosphere for watching an NHL hockey game because you're going to be right on top of the action. But the problem is, I think they're going about it the wrong way. They're trying, and I get that they're trying to maximize revenues. They're going to lose money either way on this deal because of just the sheer size of the venue. Um, uh, they're still going to have to spend up to $60 million this year to get to the cap floor. Um, the numbers don't add up, but they're trying to sell these tickets for top dollar, so like $250 a seat. Um, what they could have done and made a buzz about the Arizona Coyotes is marketed to college kids. Make $10 tickets. Come see the Arizona Coyotes, be rowdy, be banging large oil drums like we used to at my college during the hockey games. Make it a hostile environment for teams to come into, and build a buzz because 3 years from now, those kids that are in college are going to be graduating. They're going to start working, and they're going to want to go to a game and have fun and do the same thing they did in college at the Arizona Coyotes game. Uh, in their new Tempe arena. Build that base of an audience, a fan base, and not just be reliant on, oh well, the Toronto Maple Leafs are coming to town. We're gonna have a sellout because every Toronto person is in Phoenix because they want to get a vacation from the winter. Same thing with Buffalo, where we got a large Buffalo fan base already in Arizona. Um, but I think they're going the wrong way of trying to maximize revenue, which is good. But I think the more prudent investment would be to invest in the young people to get interested in hockey and to be interested as an Arizona Coyotes fan, uh, and then you have an actual fan base once you build that brand new arena. Story number 4: which teams' windows are closing this year? Every year, you might have one or two teams windows close on their competitive Stanley Cup championship runs, whether they win a championship or not. What they have a good run in the playoffs, and eventually they fall back and have to retool. And which teams that have been battling for lottery picks are going to start making that climb up. Um, I think this year is going to be transformative as far as you're going to see several teams that have normally competed for the playoffs take that step back, and you're going to see a couple teams that haven't been in the playoffs for a while make their rise. And we'll talk about that when we get into our season previews. Um, Let's see. Story number 5: the can the Avalanche repeat? That's going to be, I think anybody who does a hockey preview is going to have to ask that question. Can the Avalanche repeat? I think they've got the talent to. There's some questions about the Avalanche going forward that may hinder their ability to repeat, but yeah, they're still a phenomenally talented team. Um, and then the personal one for me, 6: can Buffalo end the longest playoff drought in NHL history? It's 11 seasons now. Um, they ended the season last year on a high, um, a high and a low. It was a high in that they really exceeded expectations towards the end of the season. They really played like a team that had turned a corner. It was a low in that it was the final season of Rick Jeanneret behind the mic, and it was high in that they won that final game, but it was low just knowing that we're never hearing that voice calling a Buffalo Sabres game again. Uh, I'm hopeful for the Buffalo Sabres, but we'll see when we start talking about our season preview where we have Buffalo coming out. Um, let's see. Let's take a look at some of the scores going forward right now. Let me get the screen back on. All right, so it's 3-2 Senators now. We've got goals for the Senators and the Canadians. Tim Stützle scored at 11:55 and of the second period, and Kirby Doc, another one of those Montreal, or I'm sorry, Chicago refugees that was traded away during the NHL entry draft. He gets his first goal as a Montreal Canadian in the preseason power play goal at 5:13. So it is 3-2 Senators. Again, this is Kraft Hockeyville out in Newfoundland. Um, this is their first one in a couple of years. They weren't having it during the the pandemic. So Kraft Hockeyville, if nobody's ever seen Kraft Hockeyville, it's where Kraft, your macaroni and cheese, they call it Kraft Dinner up in Canada. They sponsor uh, kind of picking one random town throughout the country and giving the town all these great upgrades to their hockey arena, because every town in Canada has a hockey arena, and the promise is that two NHL teams will come and play a preseason game in that arena. So again, that's what's going on here. The Devils lead the Islanders. Ryan Graves won first goal of the preseason, 8:13 of the first period. Um, so the Devils lead the Islanders. Panthers lead the Lightning 1-0 with the Zach Dalpe goal. Former Sabre Zach Dalpe scored his second goal of the preseason at 3:43, and still waiting on the Blue Jackets and Blues to start or get reports from the Blue Jackets and Blues, and we might see some Blackhawks wild action before the end of the night. So, all right, let me. Oops, I hit the wrong button. All right, we're going to take a look at the standings from last season and talk about each team. We're going to have questions for each team or questions for each team as we go into the 2022-2023 season. Um, all right, so let's take a look at the Pacific Division. This is our preview here, and I wanted to pop this in for you. So Calgary won the division. Edmonton finished second. Los Angeles made its triumphant return to the playoffs. Um, Vegas was out. So there are only 3 teams that made the playoffs from the Pacific Division. That's kind of an indication how weak the division was. 5 teams came in from the Central, and so Vegas, for the first time in their history, missed the playoffs. Vancouver was never able to recover from the really horrid start they had, and firing their coach and bringing in Bruce Boudreau. Um, Bruce Boudreau lead a turnaround. Vancouver did really well under his leadership, and but they were just too far back. San Jose, they brought in Mike Greer as the general manager, and I'm really happy for that because I think Mike Greer is a great hockey mind, and I think he's going to do well for that organization. There's just too much bad money tied up in contracts, but San Jose finished sixth in the division. Anaheim, they had a tremendous start to the season. They were, first and second at points with it, early in the year. Trevor DeSeegers, Sonny Milano were, just the dynamic young duo, and uh, but the end of the season went really, really badly. They traded off some parts like Hampus Lindholm, Josh Manson, and ended up finishing seventh. And then the Seattle Kraken, really not to my surprise. There are some people who were surprised that they didn't do well, only finishing with 60 points. But that draft was awful for them. They did get Matty Beniers in the entry draft, but the expansion draft was awful. There was too much talent left on the board, and the talent the players that they brought in were just not good enough to field a competitive team. Um, but they finished dead last in the division. So let's ask questions about each of these teams. And we'll go in the order of which they finished this last year. So with Calgary, what I want to ask is losing Johnny Gaudreau and Brady Kachuk. Can Jonathan Huberdeau take up the slack there? And not only Jonathan Huberdeau, but they also signed Nazem Kadri from Colorado. Can they take up the slack? Um, I I love Jonathan Huberdeau, um, and it depends on how they utilize Nazem Kadri. I think they can, but I think that they're gonna not have as much production this year. Huberdeau will get his points. He's just steady that way. If they don't use Kadri the right way, then it might be a bad fit for Kadri for a little bit. Um, talk about Edmonton. Edmonton, will the addition of Jack Campbell be the goaltender that they need, or even though it never worked out in Toronto, will Jack Campbell be that guy? Can he take Edmonton to the next level? Now, Edmonton has been steadily improving, getting into the playoffs, then winning around, then winning a couple rounds, um, getting into the conference finals. Can they take that another step? I think is going to be the question for the Edmonton Oilers, especially with the new goaltending. Is that goaltending what they needed, or do they really? I think to an extent, Edmonton still needs to improve their defense, and we'll see how if they can do that during the trade deadline, or you know does it bite them in the rear end again? Um, for Los Angeles, will those kids that got them into the playoffs for the first time, kids and veterans, really, uh, get them into the playoffs for the first time in a few years? Uh, are they going to take that next step? Are they going to be able to win a playoff round and push whoever they face in the division finals deep, or even beat them, get into the conference finals? That's the question for that. Can the kids take the next step, and can those veterans, because they do depend on 3 really key veterans, Anze Kopitar, Drew Doughty, and Jonathan Quick still. Um, can they stay healthy enough to go a full season and get Los Angeles, uh, have them take that next step, can to win a playoff round, win, more games this season, get a higher seed going into the playoffs. For Vegas, you're over the cap. You have a dearth of prospects because you dealt everything off to bring in top level talent. You have questions at goaltending with Robin Leonard being out the entire season. You're going to be dealing with or working with a guy that was your I think backup in the AHL to start last year, and Logan Thompson, who played, I will say, played competently down the stretch in front of a team that was very snake bit. Um, but can they remain healthy enough? Because there's a lot of star power in the Vegas Golden Knights, but there's not any organizational depth to back them up to keep them going if there is a key injury. They now dealt off Max Pacioretty to the Carolina Hurricanes, but even though he was injured, he's going to be out for several months for the Canes, healing from a ruptured Achilles. But you know, if you have an injury to Mark Stone like you did last year, if you brought in a Jack Eichel, you had to give him surgery, and he was out for most of the season, and then had the entire weight of the team put on him as soon as he got into the lineup. Alex Petrangelo, any of those guys get injured, there's not organizational depth to back them up to keep them going. So this season, if they can stay healthy, can be a very good one for them. But if they get an injury, it could go off the rails very, very quickly in Vegas. And they just don't they don't have the prospects to trade. They don't have they may have picks, a couple picks or something. They don't have they don't cap space at all. And if something goes wrong, they're just gonna have no way to really actually fix it. Sorry about knocking my mic there. Um, so let's talk about San Jose. So they made progress in getting a big contract removed. So they got rid of um, uh, uh, Brent Burns' contract to Carolina, and but they didn't learn the lesson, and they gave Thomas Hurdle a equally big contract. So move money out, move money in, or spend that money on kind of an aging core. At some point, they're going to have to start making decisions about what are we doing? Are we trying to resurrect the franchise with the core players that we have now? Even though they're not the best core players in the world. It's not like they have Vegas's core. They've got a competent core, but you still have the albatross of Eric Carlson's contract around your neck. You still have, um, and you now have Thomas Hurdle. You have Jamie or Mark Edward Vlasic. You've got several. I think there are like 7 contracts on that team that are just awful, and even for decent players, they're pretty bad. And what can they get that stupid money out of the agent core? Can they deal some of that off during the deadline? I don't know, but if not, because I don't think they're going to be making the playoffs this year. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in San Jose. Um, and will another season outside the playoffs help them see the light on their what they're doing with their contracts? Anaheim, great young forward core, but who will fill the holes on defense? They dealt off Hampus Lindholm. They dealt off Josh Manson. I know that they brought in a couple of guys, some middling guys, almost like let's bring in some old Buffalo Sabres when they were really awful defensemen. Um, and can John Gibson stay healthy enough? Uh, throughout the year. And the other question with the defense is, can they be physical enough for they've got the talent on the forward end. I mean, we haven't talked about, we talked about Sonny Milano who actually wasn't tendered a contract. There are some questionable things that they did in Anaheim this offseason, not tendering qualifying offers to Sonny Milano and Sam Steele and letting them walk for nothing. Um, but they have, young talent. They still have Zegras, who was second in the Calder vote, still does ridiculous things. They've got a guy that could be a favorite for the Calder Trophy, and Mason McTavish, Craig McTavish's kid, and there's still lots of talent there on that forward core. Can the defense be physical enough to protect that forward core? Because it's one thing to have talent. It's another thing in the NHL, especially in the long grind of a season, to be able to protect it. And I don't think that Anaheim's back end can do that. And then Seattle, better offseason, uh, bringing in Burakovsky and a couple other players. Did they do enough to move beyond the basement of the Pacific? That's the question for Seattle. I think with a fan base that is developing in Seattle, you have to show year over year progression. It's one thing that Atlanta never did as a franchise. They never showed year over year progression in any meaningful way. Um, and eventually, the shine of a new arena, a new hockey team is going to wear off, and you're going to need results to bring people back to the arena. And so that's the question with Seattle. All right, so how do I think the Pacific Division is going to shake out? Hide this for a second. So my order of finish in the Pacific Division is I have Edmonton finishing first, the Los Angeles Kings finishing second, Calgary finishing third, Vancouver fourth, and I think Vancouver makes the playoffs. Unlike last year, where the only top three made the playoffs in the division, Vegas once again finishes outside the playoffs. Anaheim, Seattle, and then San Jose. So Seattle does get that little bit of progression moving out of the basement. I think they're going to probably be in a mid 70-point team. Anaheim, again, just doesn't have enough on the back end to move them statistically forward much more than what they did last season. I think they need to start investing in the back end again, and so I think they're going to stick in six. Vegas, I don't trust the goaltending holding up over an entire season. Thompson did well over a month or so, but he did kind of show signs of wear and tear towards the end of the season. Uh, can he do it for 82? Well, for 50 games, and then Lauren Brossoit or someone else take up the slack on the as a backup? I I don't think so, and I think that Jack Eichel has had issues with injuries in his entire career. Nothing to the extent of the neck injury that kept him out for so long. But usually he would have an injury, high ankle sprain or something like that, that keeps him out a dozen games or so. And for a team like Vegas, I think is going to be so close to that cut line, like last year, that every game is going to count. Where they're not at full strength, they're not going to make the playoffs. So I've got them in fifth. Vancouver, I think full year of Bruce Boudreau behind the bench. I love Bruce, one of my favorite coaches in the NHL. Um, I think gets them in the playoffs. There's still questions about their back end. I mean, they got some names back there. I mean, Luke Hughes or Quinn Hughes is a great player. There's too many damn Hugheses in the league now. Um, Quinn Hughes is a great player, but there's just not enough on the back end that gives me confidence that they're going to shoot to the top of the division. 1 through 3, you could you could change them in and out. I don't really have much confidence that Los Angeles can take that step to actually win the division this year. So I don't think they're going to be the Pacific Division winner. but they're going to be in the top three. Edmonton, Calgary. I put Edmonton in first because I think the goaltending solidifies them a whole lot more. Um, maybe they don't go into those midseason swoons that cost them a coach last year, and had them doing panic moves, which actually all of them worked out. I mean, we bring in Evander Kane, and he turns into the just a massive goal. Well, he does what Evander Kane does when he's not blowing money in Vegas, and that's scoring goals. So um, I like that about Edmonton. I think they didn't do a ton except for the goaltending. Um, and that team got to the conference finals. So I'm not gonna rag on them too much. I've got them in first. Calgary, I think, is going to have a little bit of an adjustment period because of all the movement within their forward core. That they may not get off to that for really fast stop to or fast start. I'm sorry to get into the that first place in the division. So, but I can see again, I can see those top three just be interchangeable and we'll see what shakes out in that division. All right, let's bring that back up. Let's talk about the Central Division. All right, last year was won by Colorado, of course. The Stanley Cup winners got 119 points and led the. They were second in the NHL. Yeah, they're second in the NHL to Florida. Um, Finishing second, Minnesota, third, St. Louis, Dallas and Nashville made the playoffs in fourth and fifth, respectively. Dallas had gave a much harder fight in the playoffs than did Nashville. Nashville bowed out very quickly to Colorado. Dallas went 7 full games to the Calgary Flames before losing out. Um, Winnipeg finished sixth in the division, 89 points out of the playoffs. Chicago finished with 68 points. They didn't have a great season last year, and then they just went, well, let's tear everything out of here. Um, I think 28 points or 28 wins is something they're not going to see for a couple of years. Um, I would not be surprised if Chicago finishes less than 50 points, but we'll get to that in a moment. And then, of course, Arizona, the epic tank battle last year, finishes second and gets bumped in the draft lottery to third. Um, I didn't mind who they drafted. I can't remember his name at this point, but I think they got a good pick. Um, but yeah, so Arizona gets the is still struggling. Uh, they're still Arizona. Anyway, so my questions for the Central Division, in order of the teams that and how they finished. Colorado, as with every reigning champ, the question is, can they repeat? I believe they can. I think they've got it. They did lose a couple key pieces in Burakovsky and on that second line, Burakovsky and uh, Nazem Kadri. That's going to be hard for them to replace. But again, they're a phenomenally talented bunch. I I I don't think it's going to be a stretch to see them. It wouldn't be a stretch to say that they win the Stanley Cup in 2023. Um, it's going to be a little bit harder. The other key loss is Philip Grubauer. Um, so we'll see where they finish. Minnesota. The question with them, their financial decisions have begun to bite. You know, the Parise and Suter contracts are, still sitting in their um in the dustbin and still paying them large amounts of money and taking up large amounts of cap space, and it's only going to get bigger. And so they had to get rid of a guy like Kevin Fiala this offseason, sending him off to Los Angeles, or he signed him to Los Angeles. Um, will the Wild, mild, that's bad. Will the Wild be able to maintain their upward trajectory this season? The last few seasons, they've been on the up and up, especially with Kirill Kaprizov. Kirill Kaprizov is still going to be Kirill Kaprizov. He's still going to get tons of points. They've got young players like Matthew Boldy coming into the lineup this year. They were an offensive juggernaut at times last year. And can they continue that this year? Um, again, as that financial noose begins to tighten, their ability to go out and get players and bring them in for a cup run because they signed Marc-Andre Fleury in the offseason. Um, there's just not a whole lot of room to maneuver. So can they make those moves to get them over the hump in the Central Division? St. Louis, which Jordan Bennington are we going to see this year? Are we going to see the one that got them Stanley Cup championship, the one that went into the playoffs this year and took the starting position back and really guided the team, um, really a couple bounces away from making a much more competitive series in the Colorado series, but defeating Minnesota pretty soundly. Will it be that goaltender, or will it be the one that, when he signed his massive contract, seemed to have all that money in his pockets because he wasn't moving all that well? Um, and will St. Louis rue the idea that, well, Bennington had a really good playoff run, so we're going to get rid of Billy Husso? I don't know. I think St. Louis did a lot this offseason as far as free agency and getting players signed. Will it help them? We'll see here in a minute. Dallas. This actually got the question that I had put up here for Dallas actually got resolved today. So the contract issue for Robertson extends into the season. Where will the scoring come from? So it's going to be back with Robertson, although I think Robertson might miss a game or two at the beginning of the season. Um, he's got about a week until the season starts for Dallas, so he might be able to suit up. I don't know what his training has been while he's been out there. Another question for Dallas, though. Towards the end of his reign in Vegas, a lot of people complained about Pete DeBoer's management of goaltending in Dallas, or I'm sorry, in Vegas, throwing Robin Leonard under the bus. Um, that he was very difficult to work with. Jake Ottinger just signed a several year contract. I think it was 3-year contract to be the number one netminder. And if anybody saw that seventh game of the Calgary series, that guy stood on his head. He is a quality goaltender. Um, but can he survive Coach Pete DeBoer? If Pete DeBoer does Pete DeBoer's things, there's a chance that Ottinger might get into Ottinger's head and ruin a goaltender. I think it was easier for him to get in Robin Leonard's head. Um, but yeah, I mean that's the thing I wonder with Dallas. I'm not a big fan of Pete DeBoer. I he's done well like the first season of where he's gone. Like his first season in New Jersey, he went to the Stanley Cup Finals. In his uh, first year in San Jose, he went to the Stanley Cup Finals. He did well in his first year when he took over midseason from Gerard Gallant in Vegas. I I don't see it working here in Dallas. I don't think this is a good fit. But what do I know? I'm just a caveman lawyer. I'm frozen caveman lawyer. Let's see. Nashville just eked into the playoffs. Thanks, Nashville. You got us that lottery pick from Vegas. Well, the Preds continue to get scoring out of Matt Duchene. Matt Duchene had a renaissance year last year. He put up just tons of goals. Um, you know, he and not Peter Ford, Philip Forsberg, really drove the offense there. Really were the offense of the um, from the forward core of Nashville. Can they get anybody to step up like Travis's favorite player, Tomasino? Um, he's going into I think his third season in Nashville. Can he take that next step and become kind of that impact player? And then finally, can Roman Yossi continue to drop 96 points on the back end? I mean, that's just ridiculous numbers from a defenseman. But Roman Yossi dropped 96 points as a defenseman, and can he repeat that? Because I think Nashville barely made the playoffs with that kind of contribution. Great goaltending from UC Saros, and I think part of the reason why Nashville got bounced so quickly is that Saros was injured for the um, playoffs against Colorado. I don't. I think he played like part of one game and that was it. And but you know they barely made the playoffs with UC Saros and Forsberg and Duchesne all contributing like they did, just because they weren't getting enough out of anyone else. They had some decent young parts there, um, but yeah, they're going to have that replicated this season if they're going to continue to be in the playoffs. Winnipeg, what is this team's identity? They've got you got your Shifley, you've got Kyle Connor. Um, they stripped the captaincy from Blake Wheeler, um, but he's still there. But they're just this team looks like it just lacks an identity. They've got a new coach in Rick Bowness who he did get Dallas into the playoffs last year. Um, but there were times last year that it looked like Rick Bowness might not have survived the year, and he didn't survive losing out in the first round of the playoffs. So, uh, can Rick Bowness instill some kind of identity to this team? Like, can he make it exciting? I know that they still draw crowds because they don't want to lose another team in Winnipeg, so they're still showing up to the arena every night. But you throw a couple more losing seasons into the mix, does that start to weigh on that fan base? And so we'll see what happens with Winnipeg this season. Can they get a new identity? Let's see, Chicago. What what was that? Like I've said it a few times. What were you thinking? You usually when a franchise decides to go into a rebuild, the first to go are the veteran players. And yeah, you got rid of Marc-Andre Fleury during the season. That's fine. That wasn't a big surprise. Then getting him off to a contender, he wasn't, his only season in Chicago, so there wasn't any attachment. But then you decided to go and uh, rebuild by trading off Kirby Doc, Alex DeBrincat, getting rid of Strom, just gutting the future core of your team and maintaining your old core. Uh, I, I'm just baffled by that. So my question is, um, what is your plan? I mean, it's one thing to tank a season, and Connor Bedard is they're talking about him being a generational talent, worthy of tanking for. I get that. I lived through the Jack Eichel season and the Connor McDavid season, but I just don't understand the philosophy here. And if they don't hit a home run with the Patrick Kane trade, was the purpose of all this? You didn't get enough return on your young core, and if you don't get return on your older core, how long are you going to wander in the wilderness of the NHL? Um, yeah, it's one thing to tank a season, another thing to just completely scuttle the franchise. So, Arizona, are the Coyotes too good to compete for Connor Bedard? This is a question. I mean, the Coyotes again jettison a lot of players, but they still have Jacob Chikrin, they still have Clayton Keller, they still have um, who knows what they got on that team. When they brought in a couple players, Zach Cassian. I mean, they're going to be an entertaining team for a college environment. Like Zach Cassian's going to fight, and he's going to send the college kids into ecstasy because that's what you want to see as a young fan. And but I think a guy like Karel Vemelka, I think was way too good of a goaltender for them to tank, and that's why they didn't win the tank last year. They didn't finish first overall or last overall. Montreal got that, and Montreal got the first overall draft pick, and Arizona got bumped to third by New Jersey, so they lose the draft lottery once again. Um, so I think with what Chicago has done to themselves, that the Arizona Coyotes may be too good to compete for Connor Bedard compared to Chicago. Um, yeah, I I can't see any team in the NHL finishing behind Chicago, and if it is, there's got to be some. They're shooting players in the legs, or I don't know. I have no idea how a team would accomplish that. Um, but yeah, so let's drop this, and I will show you my Central Division predictions for how they finish. So in Division, once again, got Colorado finishing first. To be the champ, you got to beat the champ. I don't know that anybody in that division can beat them just yet. Some quality teams. St. Louis, I think, finishes second. I think they've done a lot of good work in the offseason to shore up the franchise. Getting some of their young core under contract for a number of years, and it's all dependent on Bennington. If Bennington kind of goes into that slide like he did the last 2 seasons, it could be a difficult time for St. Louis. But I think they've got enough talent on the front end and the back end to maintain second position in the conference or the division. Minnesota goes to third. Really, you could interchange Minnesota and St. Louis just because they were that close last year. I don't think that there's a gulf of difference between them this year. St. Louis did have a much better run in the playoffs by beating Minnesota, um, and I think that kind of factors into my decision to keep St. Louis at second. Nashville, I got fourth. I do think they get some of these young guys start contributing to the team, and as long as you got UC Saros in your net, you got a chance in a game. And if he can continue to get that contributions from Philip Forsberg, who they were able to get under contract, and Matt Duchene and the rest of the team, um, I think they maintain the playoffs. Plus, they've been a really good watch in this behind the scenes training camp thing on NHL Network. If you had a chance to watch it, it's really good. Like the entire team dates some kind of country star. Um, Dallas finishes fifth, and unlike last year, fifth is not going to get you in the playoffs this year. And I think it's just going to be a combination of not getting, not finding secondary scoring to supplement guys like Jason Robertson, and not finding, and I don't think that DeBoer and Ottinger are going to work all that well together. So, um, six Winnipeg. I just don't think that I don't think they're going to be able to establish an identity because I couldn't even tell you what the Dallas's identity was last year. Um, so I don't think that bodes well for Winnipeg with getting Rick Bowness as their coach. Seven Arizona, just because I don't think anybody can finish behind Chicago at number eight. I think Chicago is going to be your 32nd team. Very likely Arizona is going to be your 31st or 30th. Montreal might compete for um, compete with Arizona once again, but not finish quite as low. But that's my Central Division picks. Let's go on to the Metro Division. All right, the Metro Division last year, Carolina won that division with 116 points. Finishing second were the Rangers. The Penguins took the third place in the division, the automatic berth in the division. Capitals got the wild card berth in fourth. Islanders finished out. This division was pretty much set in stone. Probably, I mean, at least the top four, who the top four were going to be, where it was set in stone. Probably sometime mid to late January. Um, Columbus hovered around for a while, but really all the top four teams had really separated themselves from the rest of the division. So the Islanders finished fifth. Columbus finished sixth. New Jersey in 7th, and Philadelphia finished last in 8th place. I forget about Philadelphia, how moribund they're going to be this year. But um, Carolina, lots of additions. Brent Burns, Max Pacioretty. But have the Carolina Hurricanes done enough to get over the hump? They've gotten into the playoffs. They made some noise and won a round or two, won a round. But can they get that past that next round? Can they get into the conference finals? Can they get into the Stanley Cup finals? That's the question for Rod the Bod and staff in Carolina. They've done a great job building a very competitive hockey team in the regular season. Um, but they're going to have to get much deeper in the playoffs this year. That's the question for them. New York Rangers. Is this the year that the young guys really step up, like Lafreniere and Kako, and take that step into just the elite level players that they were projected to be coming out of their draft class? If they are, man, look out. Can the Rangers? There's been a lot of haughty predictions for the Rangers. Can the Rangers cut through that media madness that is the New York media market and get into, kind of fulfill their destiny? For Pittsburgh, lots of changes. You brought in a lot of good players. You've retained good players. Malkin stays there. Letang stays there. I have no idea how they did that. Um, but can they remain healthy enough? I mean, it's an aging roster. And this is going to be a recurrent theme throughout the Eastern Conference. It's an aging roster. Can they remain healthy enough to stay in the playoffs and make a deep run? That's my concern for them, and my concern for Washington. See Pittsburgh. It's the season. Is this the season we see Ovechkin start to fall back a little bit? I don't think so. I think he's still got. I still think he's going to put up over 40 goals. I think that's just anything less than that, then we can start having that conversation. But I think he puts up 40 goals. I still think he's going to beat Gretzky at one point on goals, not points and assists and all that stuff. But as goal scorer, yeah, he's gonna catch Gretzky with that, barring just a significant career altering injury. Um, let's see the Islanders. Which team will we see? Will we see the one that got to two consecutive Stanley Cup, or I'm sorry, the conference finals, only to lose in the final minute, lose by one to Tampa? Or are we going to see the one that really just kind of floated around um, uh, that last year and missed the playoffs, got their coach fired, and didn't do a whole lot in the offseason? They got Romanoff from Montreal, but there wasn't a whole lot of change on the island. And so, which team are we going to see? Did Lou Lamoriello do enough to address some of the shortcomings they had last year? I don't know. Columbus, again, this is another team, and good on them for getting Johnny Gaudreau. I think that's going to be a benefit for the franchise and people's perception of it. But what is the identity of that team? Like this is there are a couple teams that kind of exist in the NHL that kind of fly under the radar. Winnipeg is kind of one of those teams. Columbus is kind of one of those teams. Um, yeah, I think Seattle will eventually be kind of one of those teams. Um, but I just don't know what their identity is, and I don't think they do either. And we'll figure out quick going into this season whether they can establish something. For New Jersey, with the plethora of changes, will the Devils find the chemistry to take that next step? They brought in a lot of players, Andre Palat, the Vitek Vanacek in goal. They're going to hopefully get a full season out of. I'm going to say Douglas Hamilton because I hate calling him Dougie. And you should know that if you watch the show. They're going to get a full season out of Dougie Hamilton, Douglas Hamilton. Uh, they should be better, but when you bring in a bunch of pieces, there's sometimes a period where you got to gel together, and if they don't get that chemistry right at the beginning, it could take a while, and they may lose pace. Both the Eastern Conference divisions are very competitive, and if you have a slow start, just like the Islanders did last year, you could be out of it by Thanksgiving. So uh, it's going to be key for New Jersey to get off the right foot, get off quickly. With Philadelphia, can Tort survive the Philadelphia media and fan base with a team that he has on the ice? This is going to be a bad team. I know Torts has got the reputation of making a team very tough to play against. That works well. Is he going to be the Tampa and New York Torts, or is he going to be the Vancouver and Columbus Torts? Tampa and New York, he did well. Tough situations. But in Columbus and Vancouver, it didn't work, and I think he can yeah, I think he can manage the media in Philadelphia. He managed the New York media. It's the fan base I think that he's gonna have a problem with, and if this team is running around 372 next season, or below, and I think it's gonna be below, then it's gonna be a tough season for John Tortorella dealing with the fans, um, and the media at the same time. All right. We'll drop this one more time and take a look at my predicted order of finish in the Metropolitan Division. I've got the Rangers finishing first, Carolina second, Pittsburgh third, Islanders fourth, New Jersey, Washington, Columbus, and Philadelphia. So, two big things here. One, you may notice that Washington is out of the playoffs. Um, I think Washington's going to miss Backstrom at the beginning of the season, uh, and may not. They may fall out of it by early, just because of how competitive each of the Eastern Conference divisions are. Um, I've got the Rangers winning the division. I think the Rangers have put together a just a stellar lineup, and and it wasn't a whole lot of additions this summer. They had a great lineup last year. They got to the Eastern Conference Finals, but then you add somebody like Vincent Trocheck, who is just a clutch goal scorer. That's this the and you got the young guys that are going to get another year of experience and take another step forward. Um, and if they don't work out, guys like Capo and Capo Kakinen, or I'm sorry, Capo Caco and Lafreniere, if one of them doesn't work out, they can be dealt and for an asset at the trade deadline that New York will need to compete in the Stanley Cup Finals. So not only does New York have a stellar lineup, but they've got organizational depth, and uh, they have the flexibility to make moves if they need to get pieces at the trade deadline to shore up their chances in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And it doesn't have to be huge players. As we saw last year, Colorado added a couple players like uh, Josh Manson, but that's the thing that you're gonna uh, you're gonna see at the trade deadline. It's just a few pieces, role players fitting a specific need, probably bottom six, second or third pair defensemen for those organizations. So, all right, let us get to the Atlantic Division, our final division. So, Atlantic Division, the Presidents winning Florida Panthers, followed by the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Tampa Bay Lightning, Boston made it into the playoffs with 107 points. They had a great season. My Buffalo Sabres finished fifth. Struggle bus after much like the or the Metro Division. Uh, 1 through 4 were pretty solid. 5 through 8 were just the struggle bus. uh, Buffalo led that up with 75 points, but it had a really good second half of the season. and Detroit starting to make some strides. Their young players are starting to pan out. Ottawa finishing, there's 2 points between Buffalo and Ottawa, and they finished seventh. And Montreal had an awful season, going from the Stanley Cup Finals to dead last in the NHL at 55 points. So, um, so my questions for each of the Atlantic Division teams. I say the Atlantic because save the Atlantic for last because this is where my Buffalo Sabres are residing. Um, all right, so for Florida, can the Cats, who went all in the last couple seasons over the last couple playoffs, um, can they continue that current pace? Can they continue being in the mix for the President's Trophy? I don't know that that's going to be a big concern for them to win the President's Trophy, um, but can they continue to compete at a high level and win that Atlantic Division? Get first place in the Atlantic Division. Um, will Matthew Kachuk replace Jonathan Huberdeau's production? I don't think he does. Um, uh, and the other crucial questions for Florida are: can Bob have a good season between the pipes? And can Spencer Knight shake off a rough sophomore campaign? He took a step back. It's not unexpected in let me get that off. It's not unexpected in a sophomore season that the sophomore slump is the thing. So it's not unexpected, but can he bounce back and be, kind of reclaim that swagger? Because as we look at with Philadelphia, Carter Hart had a great first season. That second season did not go well, and he's never recovered. And God help him under Torts. But anyway, questions for Toronto. The question for Toronto will always be: will the Leafs win a playoff series? Uh, Beginning and end for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the window is shutting on the Toronto Maple Leafs very soon. Um, Whether it's shut by management or the contracts just start coming up. Matthews comes up pretty soon. Um, the window is going to shut, and they have no playoff wins to show for this really phenomenally talented team, at least on the forward end. Um, I don't know. I think they do finally win a playoff series this year. It just depends on who they get in the first round. With Tampa, can continue spending on an aging core. This team actually does have 7 long-term contracts that go beyond 25-26 season. Um, some of them over $8 million a year, and they gave out 3 long-term contracts this offseason. Now, one was a value contract to Nick Paul, but Nick Paul is not a massive, uh, uh, massive hire here. I mean, he's a good depth forward, but not the guy, not Nikita Kucherov by any stretch of the imagination. But they did get him at a decent rate, and they did lock him down for a while. Um, but I think by the time that contract rolls out at 8 years, there's going to be a half dozen Nick Pauls in the league that you could use that you probably can get for cheaper. Um, but yes, spending on the aging core. When will it bite them? Because it's got to bite them at some point because they're still heavily over the cap. They're still um, there's 7 players still signed through the 26-27 season for over $5 million per. That's a lot of money invested in just a very few players. Um, I gotta think the biting has been predicted for a while, and they've, to their credit, the run that they've been on is amazing. From November of 21, November of 20 until this past June or July, really, uh, they've been to 3 Stanley Cup Finals. That's an amazing feat. That's a ton of hockey. Again, this is an aging core. Do injuries start to pile up? Does production drop? We'll see with Tampa. Boston. Let's. They drove their coach out. They got players back. They were able to get Bergeron to resign. Krejci coming back. You know, is the window still open for them? Can they defy Father Time? Can they remain relevant in the Atlantic, where every team in that division, except for Montreal, has gotten markedly better? Um, it's still a very top line heavy team. That first line is everything. We've heard that Taylor Hall is going to miss the start of the season in Boston, so that second line is going to take a hit. Uh, do Allmark and Swayman, can they continue to share the crease and continue to win games? This is a make or break season for Boston, and I'm not very high on them. For Buffalo, can they take the next step? I said that earlier. Can they take the next step? Can goaltending remain healthy enough? They're relying on Craig Anderson to start the season, 41 years old, 42 years old, something like that. Um, when he's in the crease last year, when he was in the crease, he was phenomenal. Um, he was in the beginning of the season. They had a great run at the beginning of the season. Got injured early in the West Coast trip, and Buffalo struggled from there. When he made his return back, um, Buffalo took off again. But by that time, they were already out of the playoffs. Um, they brought in Eric Comrie from Edmonton, so they've got a younger goaltender, and he's in there for 3 seasons. They've got Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, the best name in goaltending, who's waiting in the wings and it's looked really good in the preseason. Looked really good in a couple of cups of coffee with the big club. Um, he's probably going to be chomping at the bit to make the leap. Um, with Craig Anderson's injury history the last couple of years, then we might see Pekka Luukkonen up sooner rather than later. Um, but yeah, they it's just, can your goaltending remain healthy enough? And did they do enough in the offseason? Really, Eric Comrie and Ilya Labushkin on the back end were their only acquisitions. Is the keep everyone together this offseason, add a couple of small pieces, and kind of build for the future? Does that work for Buffalo? I don't know. Detroit, like New Jersey, had a ton of changes this offseason. There's a lot of new players in Detroit. Can they get that chemistry together early in the season to remain competitive until they can really gel together? Um, Time will tell with them. Ottawa, it's the same story with Detroit and New Jersey. Again, tons of changes, bringing in tons of new players. Claude Giroux, DeBrincat. Um, there's just a ton of new faces. Some of the prospects they've been developing are coming into their own. Can they build that chemistry to take the next step? And again, the earlier they can do it, the better it's going to be for them. Because if they struggle out of the gate, then they're going to be behind the 8 ball when it comes to playoff time. Finally, with Montreal, they did benefit a little bit from the Chicago Fire sale, getting Doc, and but did they do enough to move from the basement of the Atlantic? I just don't think so. Um, this is going to be a long season in Montreal again. Um, Carey Price still injured, and I'm not sure that we're going to see him ever again. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a retirement announcement from him coming in a few weeks. Let's take a look at my predicted order of finish for the Atlantic Division. I've got Florida finishing first. I think they still have enough firepower to continue to lead the division. I still think it means enough for them to win first overall. Toronto finishes second. Tampa finishes third. It's much like last year. In fourth, I've got Ottawa. I think Ottawa does gel early. I think veteran leadership from Claude Giroux and the young kids in the room really gel together and do move higher. I think there are some questions as far as goaltending goes, but I think Ottawa does do well this season. In fifth place, once again, my Buffalo Sabres, not getting into the playoffs again, but I don't think it's going to be for lack of trying. I think Buffalo is going to be very competitive this year. I think they're probably going to be in the upper 80s as far as points goes. They'll be playing a couple of games that are meaningful in April, which hasn't happened in since the Obama administration, um, and maybe the first Obama administration. Uh, Detroit, I that's the team I don't think gels quite well enough and struggles out of the gate. Boston. So Boston is another team that I think window closes on them this year. And by the end of the year, they're going to deal David Pastrnak off and start their rebuild. And so Pastrnak goes off to a contending team, um, and Boston struggles out of the gate. They probably struggle with getting secondary scoring and finish seventh. And then, but it's still going to be a competitive seventh. I think from 4 through 7 in the Atlantic Division, you're probably gonna have, like, a 5-point separation, mid-80s to low 90s. And then Montreal is gonna be fighting for they'll probably be fighting Arizona for 31st overall in the league, and Philadelphia. Alright, so with those predictions already down, let's talk about conference finals. I'm not gonna go through all the finals, or all the playoffs, but, I don't see a division where only the top 3 make it. I think we're gonna have enough parity in the divisions this year where you're gonna see 1 through 4 make it in each division. All right, for my conference finals on the Eastern Conference, we're gonna have New York Rangers taking on Florida. So New York is going to escape the Metropolitan Division. Florida is going to escape the uh, uh, Atlantic Division, and they'll meet in the finals. Florida has been taking that next step the last couple of years. Out in the first round, out in the second round, third round. I think they can get past um, somebody like a Tampa or Toronto in the third round, or even Ottawa. Um, I, well, they'd have to play Ottawa in the first round. The way that I have it, they'd have to play Ottawa in the first round. So I think they can get past Toronto or Tampa, to get into into the Eastern Conference final. For my Western Conference finals, I have got Edmonton versus Colorado. So the first place teams in each division are going to meet, and it's not really much of a surprise. But I think Edmonton is like Florida has been taking that next step progression, and they got to the conference finals last year, so they're going to get into the finals this. Uh, they're going to be back in the conference finals again, a rematch with Colorado. I think it's going to be a little bit closer than the last year's. Colorado really ran them out of the building, but I think some of the losses with Colorado, their goaltending is not going to be as good, but it's going to be a closer series than what we had in last year. Finally, our Stanley Cup Finals. I have Colorado versus New York. New York has built a phenomenal team from back to front. It's just everything's quality on that roster. If they don't make it to the finals, I think it's going to be a massive failure. Um, Colorado, I think they just got enough firepower to get past Edmonton. Depth scoring. They've got a better back end. I think I would give Edmonton have an advantage on the goaltending. I like Campbell above Georgiev, but I, I think Colorado uses their experience to get into a second Stanley Cup final. But for me, my Stanley Cup final winner this year is going to be the New York Rangers. Um, I think that they just have put together that team and I know that hockey history is replete with teams that looked inevitable at the beginning of the season and for one reason or another did not win the Stanley Cup. I just think that they've got a really, really strong team, and they've had a lot of good fortune and good luck along the way. Like qualifying for the bubble and being the first team out, but actually winning the draft lottery through some weird fluke of the way that they did the draft lottery. Um, and getting somebody like Alexi Lafreniere out of that, getting a guy like Apokako. Their rebuild was not long from a competitive team that went to the Stanley Cup Finals against the LA Kings, falling a little bit, but rebuilding very quickly and getting into the Stanley Cup Finals or in the Stanley Cup playoffs again. And now I'm thinking that they're going to win the Stanley Cup Finals this year. Let's briefly run through the award winners. I think the major award winners. So the reason why I'm doing all this is at the end of the season, we're going to have a year in review and see how well I did on this. So my award winners for the Stanley Cup, the Conn Smythe has got to go to Igor Shesterkin. If they win the Stanley Cup, it's going to be because Igor Shesterkin is the most legit goaltender in the playoffs. Um, I think he's a phenomenal goaltender and um, only getting better. Young, just just a very solid goaltender. Our Hart and Lindsay award winners, and the difference between the Hart and the Lindsay awards, they're both for the MVP. The Hart is voted on by the hockey media. The Lindsay is voted on by the Players Association, and I think both are going to be Connor McDavid until somebody is the king can knock him off. He's the best player in hockey. I mean that's and if he gets into the I know they don't take playoffs into consideration with this, but he got them deep into the playoffs last year. If they are a division champion in this season, then we're definitely going to see Connor McDavid win the Hart and Lindsay awards. Vezina Award, Igor Shesterkin. I think he's the best goaltender in hockey right now, and I think he's going to have a nice long run as a top top two goaltender in the NHL for several years at the very least. For the Norris, I've got Kale McCarr of the Colorado Avalanche. This kid is just getting better and better, and the stuff he does. There was that goal last year where granted they were playing Chicago, but he's taking the puck behind the net, goes up the boards about halfway out of through the offensive zone, cuts on a dime, just changes direction from going towards the out of the zone, doubles back and goes in and scores a beautiful goal. I mean, there are things that he does as a defenseman that I don't expect top line forwards to do. Um, but he's this new breed of defenseman that can create just as much offense as even your top line forwards. Roman Josie's like that. Cale Makar is like that. Adam Fox is like that. I think you're going to see guys like Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin get into that conversation as well. But Cale Makar is heads and shoulders above everybody in the league, I think, as far as defensemen go. For our Cardinal Memorial, which is the Rookie of the Year award, that's going to go to Mason McTavish. And I know a lot of people are like, "Well, you're a Buffalo Sabres fan. It should be, Owen Power, or maybe even Jack Quinn." I think the problem is that Buffalo is bringing in too many young players this year that qualify for the Calder Trophy. You got JJ Peterka, who I think is going to have a very quality season. You've got Jack Quinn. I don't think Peyton Krebs qualifies anymore. I think he actually has finally passed all the games to not be a rookie. And then you got Owen Power. Those are three guys I think who are going to do really well as a group, but I think may kind of take away. There's not going to be that one guy that is head and shoulders above the rest of the rookies because there are too many on the team. So I think Mason McTavish, who had a nice cup of coffee with the Anaheim Ducks towards the end of the season last year, I think will run away with the trophy just because he is that one guy on Anaheim. And then finally, of the major awards that I'll predict, we'll talk about the Adams Award. That is going to go to Gerard Gallant of the New York Rangers. Now they don't vote again; they vote for these before the playoffs start. Um, but I would not be surprised to see the Rangers win the President's Trophy. Um, but to me, any coach that really survives the New York media and delivers, a first place team in the NHL, whether it's regular season or postseason, has to be considered for the Adams Award. And despite all of his, you know, great work at different stops, I don't think he's won the Adams Award yet. So he might have won it in Vegas, but um, yeah, it should be a good season for Gerard Gallant with the talent that's amassed in New York and the way they built that team. I think it's going to be a very good year for him, and he'll win the Adams Award. All right, well, that is the show this evening. I've got a lot of predictions, and I got to get up at 2:45 in the morning. So, um, anyway, we'll be back next week with actual NHL games to talk about. The games really start kicking off on Thursday on next week, so we'll be happy to talk about the scores. Actually, we'll look at the scores as before we head out. And these are just preseason scores, but remember, regular season games start tomorrow, and so we got still 3-2 in. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the Islanders. I guess the other game is completed. So 3-2 Islanders. We got goals from Barzal, Dobson, and Johnston, and for the Devils, Graves and Clark. For the Islanders and Panthers, I'm sorry, Panthers and Lightning, 2-1. We've got a goal for Nick Paul, Zach Dalpe, and Hepo Niemi scoring for the Panthers. For the Blue Jackets and the Blues, the Blue Jackets are all over the Blues early in the first period. Patrick Laine, Chinnikov, and Jack Roslovic scoring for the Blues or for the Blue Jackets. Wild already up 2-0 on the Blackhawks. Uh, Michael Rossi, Marco Rossi. That's it. And Frederick Gaudreau have scored for the Wild, and we're still waiting on the Golden Knights and Kings to start here at 9 o'clock in about 15 minutes. And the final from Kraft Hockeyville, the Ottawa Senators beat the Montreal Canadiens 4-3, which means the Canadiens did finish winless in the preseason at 0-6-1, I believe. Um, but yeah, Batherson, Kachuk, Stutzla, and Claude Giroux. So all the big guys for the Ottawa Senators scored in the game. And then Caden Gooley, Kirby Doc, and Josh Anderson scoring for the Montreal Canadiens. So the kids in Newfoundland saw some good quality players scoring in that game. Again, a 4-3 victory for the Ottawa Senators. But anyway, hope you get a chance to watch the game tomorrow at 2 p.m. I think it's going to be on NHL Network. Um, it's the Global Series live from Prague, Czechia. It'll be the Nashville Predators and the um, San Jose Sharks to open the season. But anyway, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thanks. Did we had one stay pretty loyal to us on Twitch? I really appreciate that. We had some folks pop in and out. Had some folks up on the TikTok. Thanks for joining us on TikTok as well. And we will talk to everyone next week.